what to do about collecting GIS data when you don't have a reliable or immediate connection. And the reason I got involved with this challenge was because it chimed with a specific problem that we're trying to address at the moment. I work for an organisation called CABI, and we've got a lot of expertise in managing alien invasive species. I don't know whether that's a concept that's familiar to a lot of you. Agricultural problems, especially alien invasive weeds. We have a lot of programs for control of alien invasive weeds in Africa, and they're a problem in Africa that's come in partly as a result of aid activity. When there are a lot of support to the famine problems in East Africa that happened in the, what would have been now, the 80s. There was a lot of grain that was imported into East Africa, and unfortunately with that grain also came weed seeds. And there were some particular weed seeds that came in associated with weeds like Parthenium. And they're quite nasty weeds, they're quite pernicious, they spread, there's no natural enemies in the environment in which they've been introduced, and the effect is that they carpet large areas of rangeland, they affect cattle, livestock, get poisoned by them, and even the action of pulling them can be problematic because they have blistering effects and they can blister up your arms. Anyway, so we've got control programs around control of these sort of weeds. We're interested in raising awareness of these weeds and of trying to tie up with national programs to control them. So that's one part of what we do in CABI. Another part of what we do in CABI is working with mobile phone applications. And some bright spark said at some stage, can we talk together and create mobile phone applications which address the weed problems? And these sort of things exist out there. There are applications that have been developed in a European context and a North American context for citizen science reporting and engaged people reporting to say, here's an application, come and tell us that the weed is there, and we'll do something about it, whether it's, it then informs monitoring systems, allows us to see where the thing's going to spread next, or we can tie it up with a specific control program so that we can control that weed. What's the application look like? Well, we discussed that in a little bit of detail, and we made some observations. The fact that mobile phone, smartphones of the kind that one would need in this context, where you could take a photo to confirm diagnosis of this is the weed that we're talking about, and you can report back they exist, those applications exist, and one could modify them for the context of Africa. Now the question is are there enough smartphones in the areas where the problems are? And the simple answer is, at the moment, probably not. But by the time we get our act together and actually build an application and tie up with the control programs, in 5 years' time, we're seeing the growth of smartphone penetration in South and East Africa. And actually, yes, there probably is a viable solution there. So we're interested in it. Problem is in a lot of those areas, there isn't sufficient connectivity. So we need a smartphone application that one can take a photo with of the location and be able to somehow stamp the photo with the GIS coordinates and sort of queue it up in the mobile phone, so that when you've then got connectivity or Wi-Fi connectivity, one can then feed back on that data. So we talked about what the app might look like, and we thought it was viable. But I think the most interesting conversations that we had around it were, okay, it's not just a tech solution. We need to have an enabling environment for this thing to work. And that's where the conversation broadened out more. And we said, okay, well, what other things do we need to have in place for this technical solution to work?
So, it started off with GIS data. Sadly, we don't have the means or the solution for which everyone can share terabytes worth of GIS shapefiles. But I enjoyed particularly the fact that this did, as Martin said, become a conversation about the proper engagement and socialization of this technology. One of the things that I said that I'd like to share with these kind of groups is essentially, I don't mind getting an electronic invite to a party on my phone, but I also don't want to then go to the phone and talk to everyone at the party on my phone. And I kind of feel like when we look at mobile solutions, when we look at crowdsourcing, that's typically what happens, is that the mobile solution, the technology behind this becomes the solution for the full extent of addressing the entire problem. And in this case, we talked about how to have that not be the case. And so the mobile solutions behind this become the identification of the problem, but our conversation quickly turned into all of the facets of that problem and addressing it. A lack of ownership, dealing with scale and understanding what that is, dealing with the management of expectations for those contributing to these systems as well. So we talked about with these managing expectations, a lot of the times when people contribute to these systems, they expect help to be on the way in some capacity. And so as we were trying to manage expectations around a system like this, where farmers could be contributing, I've identified, or at least I think I've identified, weeds in this area, we could then turn that over to first other farmers within their region, their association, to help identify these problems. As it goes up to the national system, I think there was a lot of, as in our experience, dealing with a lot of these national systems feeling like, in terms of, and then coming into the scale, feeling like these are going to have to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. And we don't have the capacity for this. We can't scale to that regard. But if we can then source these mobile applications to also not just identify the problems, but also share the discussion here and be a foundation towards getting these associations to talk more frequently and more pointedly about these things, then we can then associate that information with all of them and they can begin to work more independently. This way it frees up these national systems to then respond to the problem itself in the areas that are most critical. And in the sense that these mobile applications can then not just simply be responsive to dealing with emergencies as they arise, but these national systems can look at the big picture, the aggregate of data collected by these mobile solutions, and in that sense look at and be more proactive. And it's not just a responsive system anymore, it's a proactive system that says, okay, here are the hotspots, here's the gaps. Why are we not seeing the problem in these areas? Has it simply not spread, and do we need to be in this area ahead of time? Or has this certain region come up with a solution for these kind of problems that we can then bring back to these associations? And so it becomes kind of a finding feature dealing with the problem in a proactive way. So I'm going over our notes here. Ultimately, it comes down to a sense of ownership around this. Ownership in the sense that the technology is, again, not the solution. It's not the foundation of the solution for all this. But as these systems go up, there needs to be that level of ownership of knowing where the data is going, knowing how it's going to be disseminated back down. And in that sense, I think we're going to be continuing a discussion about how to work the technology into these things at certain entry points, so that, you know, again, we're not relying on the technology to be everything, but we're putting it in at certain critical moments within this framework that we're building, so that the communication is where it needs to be online, and then also leveraging these offline networks.